So good evening, everyone. Welcome again to our Thursday meditation talk and Dhamma talk. So tonight we again have Bhante Pandit come back to give us a very interesting talk again. So for recording purposes, I will give a very brief introduction of Venerable Pandit. So Pandit is a British Buddhist monk ordained in Theravada tradition since 1996. So he's the founder and principal teacher of the Little Bangkok Sangha, which for a long time was the only Sangha offering Dhamma talks in English in Bangkok. So Bhante has a degree in psychology and master in business studies, and he is known to be a very engaging speaker who effortlessly makes the links between the Buddha's teaching and the contemporary understanding of consciousness. So Bhante has specific interest in psychology, and he often incorporates fairy tales in his Dhamma talks. So various media of his talks are available online, and it can be found on YouTube at his website called littlebang.org, as well as at the AEB website. We have a lot of Bhante's talk at AEB website as well. So today Bhante will continue his talk in this topic called the Pesky thoughts. So I think the last talk Bhante talked about undirected minds and things. So we were requesting that, how we can control our mind. So Bhante promised to come back and give us a guidance on this topic. So over to you, Bhante.
So we're going to sit together briefly before we start. Is that okay? Okay.
Yep.
So just settle yourself into your meditation. In line with this week's topic, try to note what thoughts are in your head. What is it you really want to think about? Are you able to put those thoughts aside? Are you able to move into a different way of being? Or do the thoughts entrap you, catch your attention, make you lose mindfulness? So pay attention to what thoughts are in your head, what happens to them if you stop thinking about them, what awareness will arise in the absence of thought. So we'll sit together just for a few minutes. So make your minds bright and as still as you can, and return the attention to loving kindness, the universal well-wishing for all world beings. Important to note, this is unconditional. Whatever beings, however good or evil, however much we agree or disagree, whether they are seen or unseen, near or far away, we try to generate that beautiful, sincere wish that all world beings should be at ease, be free from suffering. Sabhe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabbatso sabba buddha nupavena sabba dhamma nupavena sabba sangha nupavena satta soti bhagwan te.
Sadhu.
Last but one time that I will be with you this year, and hopefully
It's not
we'll,
the final, Bhante, it's another one.
yeah, the last but one time,
Yeah.
the penultimate time this year.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question that I have on my mind currently is about our meditation, and I'm always insistent that to enter into the supramundane states, or the truly insightful states, or the mystic states that can be gained from meditation, then we have to step beyond thinking. But in the current situation in the world, with two major wars going on, a new one added last week, then the question arises that if we are a meditator and you just put your head in the sand and try to not think about anything, are you then moving, are you ignoring the problems in the world? And then my response to that is, well, if you are thinking about it, is your thinking going to solve the problems in the world? One of the things that I've noticed is actually nicely summed up in a Bob Dylan song. You are right from your side and I am right from mine. And I've seen that so much that it can seem in your mind that you are so right, so clearly right, that if you could just explain to people, then everybody would agree and there would be no more problems in the world. But of course, this isn't going to happen, and it's never happened. And when you open your mouth, then you find that people are very quick with their disagreement. So I was looking the other day at a news broadcast from Australia, actually. It was actually Sky News Australia, which I'm not, I don't follow closely, but they had a section on with a woman who was crying in the studio about climate change and saying, how can you ignore it? Why are you not on the streets with me demonstrating, and this was a few days after there was a Andrew Lloyd Webber performance play, and people had paid between $100 to $300 to go and see this play. And the climate organization, formerly known as Extinction Rebellion, now known as Just Stop Oil, they climbed onto the stage and started waving their banners around right at the middle of the performance. And so the whole crowd was booing because they paid all this money to come and see. And it was right at the crucial song, the big song of the performance. And so the woman was on the news the next day crying, saying, how can you not be up there demonstrating with me? Your children won't have any food. The water will become lapping around your ankles. I myself am definitely a climate change skeptic. Just about all of these things that I see in the news, it's quite easy to prove that they're not going to happen. For example, there was a ridiculous survey done that said if the sea levels rise by 2 feet, Great Britain won't have any beaches. And the idea that the beaches only exist just at this one exact level, and that seawater doesn't wash sand up onto the edge where it meets the land anyway, is just so outrageously stupid. But it's a scare tactic. So there may be very real environmental concerns, I'm sure, but most of the alarmist things, I saw one in Australia. Didn't you have a MP during the last election, and he gave his speech from the middle of Sydney Harbour with the water up to his chest? Didn't that happen? Did you see that? Nobody's. I promise you, it was someone Google it. It was one of your politicians, and he gave his political speech from the Sydney Harbour with the water up to his knees, and then he carried on, and the screen cut off and cut back, and it was up to his waist, and then it cut off and cut back, and it was up to his chin. He obviously didn't make very much of an impact because none of you have even seen this. I promise you, someone find the link and put it in the chat because it's there. He didn't win he wasn't the MP. He was trying to get the candidacy. So then a couple of days ago, Rishi Sunak, our erstwhile British Prime Minister, has rolled back. He's saying the plans the government have to limit your air travel, he said, I've abandoned them. He said the plans they have to force people to be vegetarians, I've shelved them. So he's rolling back. So I was just thinking how people have the same information but come out with radically different conclusions. Now, oftentimes this is not so bad, but of course, when it comes to war and somebody says, this is my land, and somebody else says, no, the Bible shows that we were here 5,000 years ago, and someone says, well, I was here 2,000 years ago, and they all go to fighting. When you know that actually, if people are brought up with any sensibility, nobody really wants to fight with anybody else. But when opinions come into the question, thoughts and opinions and ideas come into it, then human beings have a curious intolerance to be unable to hear things they don't agree with. And I think this is a real problem in life and in society, that when you disagree with something, just an opinion, it grows, it rankles, and you get this tremendous urge that you have to put out your opinion. So earlier today, I was talking to a friend of mine, and some years ago, she is somewhat technically challenged when it comes to internet stuff, but she runs a dance center. And she said at the time they had 3 websites and 3 domain names under 6 different companies. So she was getting bills from 6 different places. So, and she didn't really know the difference between a domain name and a website, and she thinks she's paying twice. So over a period of a year, I managed to get control of all of these, and I put them under one company called Midphase, and they would host up to 10 websites and all her domain names. Because of the demands that she put on me to continually, you see, this is why you don't always help people, because then every time they get a problem, they come back to you. So every time she had a problem that had nothing to do with Midphase, the company that I'd used, but they would come to me. Anyway, so they had some problems, and then I just left it. Somebody else took over and helped them, and they did something else. And this was about 8 years ago now. Talking to her today on the phone, she said, well, you put us onto that company Midphase, and I had all these problems, so I had to stop them. Now, I know that Midphase, all they do is rent you a server space. They don't provide any service. They just allow you to put your information onto their server. So how can you have a problem? So I was like bursting to try and tell her this. Now, she's a very good friend of mine, and I like her a lot, and we speak regularly. I go over for lunch quite regularly. I know that if I start telling her that she's got this wrong, that Midphase were not the problem, then I'm not going to convince her. She's already, somehow she and I are getting the same information, but coming out with totally different conclusions. And I feel so right that it's really hard not to do anything about that. However, it's not going to help the situation. I know that she's right from her side, and I am right from mine. So the question of thinking and whether we should think about and engage in the world, or whether as a Buddhist you should not engage in the world, is a very relevant one, because all of us will have to get engaged in and work with the people around us. So the question of conflict resolution, then, where does the resolution come from, is one which in Buddhism might seem a little unsatisfactory. And the resolution is, well, you have to put down all arguments and have metta for all people, unconditional loving kindness. But then that seems like a cop-out. Seems like that's not going to help. So I want to show you briefly a cartoon, which I think was quite amusing. So just give a thumbs up if you can see the cartoon. Okay. So there we have our yogi mouse. He said the true maze is inside us. So, not super helpful. The thing that I liked about that is it does make the point. It makes the point that if we talk about then putting aside thoughts, ending our thoughts, and just having universal loving kindness, it doesn't help anyone. And that I don't agree with. I think, in fact, that it does. There was a story of Nasruddin the Mullah. I'm sure you've heard of Nasruddin, many Nasruddin stories around. He was a Sufi character. And at this time, Nasruddin is working as a judge, and 2 people bring a court case to him. And what had happened is they both own land, and the land was divided by a river. But the river had changed course and had moved. So the one man said, well, my land has always gone up to the river, and now the river has moved. My land has increased in size, but that's because my land goes to the river. And Nasruddin, the judge, says, I agree with you, you are correct. Then the other man on the other side of the river, he says, but judge, the land has always been divided by this line marked by the rocks in the bottom of the river. The rocks in the bottom of the old river still mark out the old river course. So that's where the divider is between our land. And Nasruddin, the judge, says, you are right. I judge for you, you are correct. And then the clerk to the court says, but Your Honor, these two people have conflicting claims. They can't both be correct. You have to choose one of them. And you know what the judge said to the clerk? He said, you are right. I agree with you. So that's kind of how it seems, that if you are going to put aside thinking, let go of thinking and move into a different way of being, then you are just refusing to engage with the things in the world, which has some validity to it, this argument. However, this argument assumes that what I call the if everyone argument. Have you ever come across this? It's like, well, if everybody thinks like this, then that would happen. Or they say, well, if everybody covered their roof with solar panels, then this would happen. Or if everybody, I sometimes get this as a monk, people say, well, if everybody became a monastic, we wouldn't have any more children, there'd be no more people. Somehow giving validity to the idea that there could ever possibly be a time when all men and women stop procreating. I mean, it's not going to happen. Human beings are human beings, and you're never going to get everybody becoming a monk. But that's the if everybody argument. So if everybody practiced like you do, Bhante, and stop thinking, then there would never be any solutions in the world. And I reject that argument, because there is never going to be a time when everybody in the world stops thinking, when everybody in the world stops arguing. It's not going to happen. So I refuse to entertain that possibility. You may know the story of the Buddha. I'm not sure I'm going to tell it again anyway. It bears repeating. We can think about it. Of the time when the Sakyan clan, where the Buddha was from, was having a dispute with the neighboring clan. I think they were called the Kolian. And they were arguing over the water rights. The water in the river was drying up, and they were arguing about who has the right to the water. And it came to the point where both sides raised an army, and the two armies came to clash. Now, the Buddha had long since left his home kingdom, but he was well respected by the Sakyans, but also by all the people in the region. So when the two armies came to fight, the Buddha went and sat between them. And sometimes you see him holding his hands up in a statue you see around in Thailand. They hold his hands like this. And this is imploring the people who are, although they're from neighboring towns, they're actually very closely related, imploring them not to fight. So when they saw him, they were both ashamed and put down their weapons and went home and solved the dispute sensibly. So this happens partway through the Buddha's time as a teacher. But right at the end of his life, there was an argument between the Sakyan kingdom and the Kosalan, I think it was Kosala. and they were the major power of the area under the king Ajatasattu, who had killed his father to take over the kingdom. And there was a dispute over a princess, what else? And the major town came to destroy the Sakyan kingdom. And again, the Buddha went and sat between these two armies when they were about to clash. Apparently, he sat under a tree that was slightly on the Sakyan side, and he said, the shade of one's relatives is cooler. I never figured that statement out, but it's part of the story. Anyway, the armies then, seeing the Buddha, they didn't clash and they separated, but the next day they came to clash again. And again, he sat between them 3 times on 3 days. He went and sat between these two armies and they didn't clash. The 4th time, when they came to clash, the Buddha didn't go out, and the major kingdom destroyed the Sakyan kingdom and razed the, say, city, but more like a town, to the ground, and utterly destroyed the Sakyan people, the Buddhist people. So it seems at some point the Buddha also was able to say, well, there's only so much you can do, and at some point you just have to leave people to fight, to fight it out. Now, I mentioned this story the other week with the Metta Center, and Tina there pointed out that in the commentary to this story, there was a statement that the Sakyan people had a karma, and it was their karma to get wiped out. And so that was why the Buddha left them to fight, because he saw that it was their karma. But I have a few difficulties with this part of the story. Firstly, these commentaries were written several hundred years after the Buddha. So we can't really say what the Buddha knew and what he didn't know. If you're in a court of law, that would be called hearsay. You can't say what, you can't claim to have knowledge of somebody else's mind in a court of law. I know this because I used to watch Judge Judy. Somebody, you know, right? Helena knows who Judge Judy is. The other second problem that I have is sometimes we use karma to kind of like whitewash or explain away. If there's something that you don't like or you don't understand or makes you suffer, have some kind of way to explain it. And somehow things are better if we... Christianity does this. They say, well, that was God's choice or God's will that this side lost. For some reason, every side that comes to fight in a war, they all believe God is on their side. You notice that? Yeah. Have a different name for God, but definitely God is on our side. I've noticed that boxers do the same thing. When they win, they thank God, like God made me win. And when they lose, they say, well, God didn't want me to win today. You'd think if anybody could actually just take ownership of their skills and abilities, and it would be a boxer. But so I think that about the explanation of karma, that somehow to explain something away as being just karma, it isn't really satisfactory to me. When I look in the Buddhist suttas, the Buddha never used karma in this way. He talked about karma, meaning that your choices now influence your future. That's very different to your choices in your past deciding your current state. And it's not immediately obvious, but if you think about it, if my choices in the past determine what I am now, I don't have much agency in the present moment. I am a victim of my past. My past is controlling me, controlling my thoughts, my condition. And if I get sick or I have my car stolen or something, then that must be just because of my past karma. The Buddha never talked about karma in this way. You might find one example or two examples, but really didn't talk about it in this way. But karma being what you do now, affecting your future, that puts all the agency onto you. That means that your choice, your action right now is extremely important for creating your future. And that's what the Buddha, I believe, was pointing to. He wanted people to take charge of themselves, to take charge of their karma, to know that my choices have an effect and will affect my future and my being and my soul and my psyche. And never think, well, if something bad happens, that was, because of my past karma. So the story of the Buddha allowing the two kingdoms to fight because he could see their karma. If he could really see their karma, why did he try and stop them from fighting in the first place, if it was so preordained? So this is, again, an example of human beings trying to figure stuff out by thinking, and that somehow we'll think our way to enlightenment or we'll think our way to world peace. And I haven't really seen around in the world people thinking their way to world peace. I may be wrong in this. I recently read the book by Jared Kushner. He's Donald Trump's son-in-law, married to Ivanka Trump. And he did a lot of work during the Trump administration in the Middle East with Israel and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, and managed to get them all to sign this peace accord called the Abraham Accords, which were truly remarkable. And even Morocco called up the Trump administration and said, why haven't you talked to us? We want to sign these accords too. So it's quite impressive, the progress that he made, but of course it's all broken down now and it's all gone to ruin. For what reasons, I don't know. I don't really want to say. So I think that sometimes things just suck. Sometimes things bad and there's sufferings happen and you can't do anything about it. But the one thing that we can do is come to the resolution in our own psyche, in our own mind. And the saints and sages of the past and recent past have all said that the influence of an enlightened person on the world is uncountable. And I find this very interesting. Ramana Maharshi said this, Punjaji said this. I went to see him in India one time. I read a book by Lorna Byrne. She's a Christian woman in Ireland who claims to see angels everywhere. She sees them and talks to them. I'm a little skeptical. I read the book because I like to look and listen and learn. I'm rather skeptical, but one of the things that she said was the archangel had come and appeared to her and had told her that the effect of an angel, even though people can't see or hear this angel, the effect of that being is great and vast in the world. So I'm a little skeptical. Her name is Lorna Byrne. If you're interested, I'll put this in the chat afterwards. It was an interesting book. I was actually more interested in her life growing up in the early 60s in Ireland. That was actually more interesting to me. I didn't realize just how much poverty there was in Ireland in the 1960s and what a hard landscape it was to survive in. That was interesting to me. So our task as a Buddhist, as a meditator, is not so much to find the solutions in the world. I don't have the solutions. I can apply the if everybody argument, like if everybody stopped hating and using guns, that would go a long way to world peace. And I think I'm right. But the if everybody argument, I don't really buy into it, because it doesn't happen. This is what happens with Buddhist conferences. I get invited sometimes in the university, and they invite you there, and they divide you up into groups, and they give each group a topic, like Buddhism and family life, and Buddhism and crime, and Buddhism and the economy. And then you go off and have a discussion, and you come back and report your findings to the conference. And every time they go back, they go off and discuss, and they come back with Buddhism and family life. Answer: if everybody was a Buddhist, family life would be perfect. If everybody was a Buddhist, our economies would be perfect. There'd be no greed. If everybody was a Buddhist, there wouldn't be any crime, and etc., etc. And I find these arguments unappealing. They seem kind of foolish to me, even if ostensibly they're right. So our job is not so much to find the solutions in the world. I do hope that the politicians and the people in power are able to do that and willing to do that. And I give them support to do that. But our job is to put aside the thinking, put aside this thinking mind, the opinionating mind, and move over to the universal loving kindness kind of mind. It's easier said than done, but I want to be very clear that although we can conjure up various different perceptions in the mind, the truly mystic states that will change you and guide you through lifetimes of practice, these come from when you completely put aside thinking and thought. So metta, although it's also a thought, remember, is also an object on which you can attain to jhana meditation, total concentration. And for jhana, you have to have gone beyond the thinking mind. If your mind is still thinking, then you're not in deep concentration. But metta will increase with however much concentration that you put on it, all the way through jhana or concentration states. So the sutta, which talks about how to control distracting thoughts, some of you may have seen before, is quite a popular or well-known sutta. So many people give Dharma talks on it. And so I'll go through it fairly quickly. This sutta is called the 5 Ways to Control Distracting Thought, or Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Sutta. And I'm just going to put a copy in the chat, and I'm going to share the screen so we can actually see the sutta in real time. Give me a second for my Bluetooth keyboard. There we go. So I put the sutta in, but I'm going to share the screen to go onto the sutta itself. You can now. Okay, good. So in this sutta, we'll come with a standard line saying the mendicant, that's Bhante Sujato's translation means monk, has found themselves with thoughts, unskillful thoughts connected with desire, hate, or delusion. And so as they do, those bad thoughts are given up and come to an end. So just seeing that the thinking is there, the thoughts should come to an end. Then this is the most important line in the sutta. Their mind becomes stilled internally, settles, unifies, and becomes immersed in samadhi. And this is important because many people talk about this sutta, the 5 ways to control distracting thought, but they never talk about this line. And this line appears every time the Buddha gives a method for controlling distracting thoughts. So it's like people want to control their thinking, but they're not ready to go into the unification of mind or samadhi. I want to make very clear, every time the Buddha mentions this, he repeats this line. The mind becomes stilled internally, settled, unifies, and becomes immersed in concentration. So there's 5 methods to control the thoughts. The first method is to change the subject of the thinking. So if you're thinking about one thing, think about something else. You cannot think about 2 things at once. I know you think you can. I know it appears that some people can. I've met some incredible multitaskers, but if you pay attention to the mind, that actually you cannot think about more than one thing at a time. So you just think about some other thing. So if you're thinking about how much somebody upset you, think about your pet cat or your pet dog. Well, maybe not your pet dog if you've just lost your pet dog. If your dog is Lucy, then don't think about it. And by changing the topic, you will let go of the attachment that those thoughts have been having in your mind. The Buddha compared it to like a carpenter when they would put 2 pieces of wood together. Because nails and screws and glue were hard to come by, they would drill a hole through the 2 pieces of wood, and they would knock a peg through the 2 pieces of wood, and it would join them together. And that's how you would make furniture. But if you want to remove that peg, you take a smaller peg and you knock it out. So that was, I think most people in that time and era would know about that. They would know about pegs in furniture. So he said, like knocking one peg out with a smaller peg, you can take unwholesome thought and knock it out with some wholesome thought. So you can turn your attention to metta or loving kindness or your pet cat, anything just to turn attention away from those unwholesome thoughts. The second method that he had was to view the drawbacks of that kind of thinking. So I read it out because it's quite amusing. If you look at and feel the thinking instead of just thinking it, you start to arouse this kind of disgust that actually this thinking is afflicting me, it's hurting me, it's making me feel unhappy. His analogy: suppose there was a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of adornments, and if you were to put the carcass of a snake or a dead dog and hang it around their neck, that person would feel horrified and disgusted. So lovely, colorful metaphors that the Buddha uses. If you put a dead dog on someone's shoulders, they immediately want to throw that dead dog off. So if you look at the unwholesome or the suffering aspect of your thinking, you will immediately want to throw it off. The third method that he gave was to forget about it. So if thoughts come up and they're distracting you, simply try to forget about them or ignore them. He gave the analogy that if there's somebody that you don't like that's causing you problems and you look somewhere else, then the perception disappears. You just look somewhere else, turn your face away. This is interesting, judging from what I said earlier, that Buddhists can be accused of putting their head in the sand and ignoring world problems. So that was method number 3. Method number 4 was to stop the formations. Stop the formations of the thoughts, which I've highlighted for you. So if you are really mindful you can catch thinking just as it starts to arise. And as it starts to arise, it's like a tickle in your belly, in your stomach. And you know what the thought is going to be if you allow yourself to think it. So it comes up as like a pre-thought nugget. If you catch that and you don't allow it to expand into like a language, into a linguistic thought, then you can actually allow it to cease right there before the thought forms. His analogy for this is like, what if I was running and I think, should I walk? What if I'm walking? I thought, should I walk slowly? If I'm walking slowly, what if I stand still? If I stand still, what if I sit down? So you slow the thinking down step by step by step. And the fourth method, there is actually the fifth method. There is actually a sixth method, which I'll give you. This is my own, number 6. The Buddha only gave today, you'll get. So it's quite amusing, this one. If you still are beset with uncomfortable thoughts, with teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, you squeeze, squash, and crush mind with mind. So this is a little different to many Vipassana teachers who say, just be aware of the thoughts, allow them to be there. Here the Buddha is saying, no, you bash them out of existence. Wake up, take control, take agency. I wouldn't recommend this for a long-term practice, because what you're fighting yourself, and you and yourself is always the same size and power as yourself, because you're fighting yourself. This is why throughout history you always have these stories of equals who come in to fight each other. My favorite is the one of Achilles and Hector and the Battle of Troy, and these two fantastic warriors, and they're both so perfect in their warriors' ability that neither of them can actually gain an advantage over the other. But eventually Hector finds out that Achilles actually is vulnerable in his ankle, so he shoots an arrow into Achilles' ankle. But this motif of two equals fighting each other is what happens when the mind is fighting the mind. It's you are fighting yourself. So you need a trick to somewhere where the fighting ceases, not that one side wins or one part of your psyche manages to beat down the other part of your psyche. But what happens when all of this stuff stops? So that was the 5 methods. The 6th method I'll give you, which is my own addition. If you still can't control your thoughts, I just go to bed. You've tried your best. Sometimes you just need to give up, go to bed, get a good night's sleep, or maybe go swimming or play tennis or something, and come back and try again another time. The mind will go like this. It does for me too, that some days I can really concentrate my mind and some days I can't. Consistency of practice is important. So I want to finish today, or this evening for you guys, this afternoon for me, with a reminder of this line that the Buddha gives over and over and over again throughout this sutta. He repeats this line. Te sangpahana ajittameva jittang santitati sanistati ekodi hoti samadhiyati. So the English is a little easier to understand. Their mind becomes settled internally, stilled internally, settles, unifies, and becomes immersed in concentration. I want to make really clear that this is really important, that every part of Buddhism is always pointing to this mystic experience that lies outside of the ordinary mind. That is our job as a meditator, as a mystic from all religious traditions. They all have these teachings that is trying to get you to step out or beyond the ordinary mind, the thinking mind, and move into these beautiful, incredible, unified states of mind, just touching on which are enough to propel you into a lifetime of practice. The insights that come from these states, one of the Spanish mystics, Saint Teresa of Avila, she said, they are secret communications from God, and they teach you things that you can't put into words. So I want to make very clear that these internal states where the mind becomes unified, immersed in samadhi, other times the Buddha used the word luminous. So the mind is luminous, but it's obscured by defilements. But because the mind is luminous, when the defilements are removed, that luminosity will show itself. If it were not for this, he said, there would be no living of the holy life. So I want to make very clear that our job is to try in our practice, not just to observe or be mindful or be peaceful, but to start this process of stepping beyond the ordinary mind and starting to see, feel, touch, appreciate, and understand where these other states lie. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm going to stop sharing. I did notice that somebody found that video and put it into the chat. So here's the one.
Helena found it.
Oh, it wasn't in Australia. I could have sworn it was Sydney. In fact, I'm so sure that I still think there's another one in Sydney. I'm absolutely certain. It's one of the lesser parties, and not one of the parties not the one that won the candidacy in Sydney. And they did it in the Maldives, if you remember. I think in 1990s, they invited these foreign ministers from dozens of big countries around the world to the Maldives, and all these foreign ambassadors thought, yeah, great, we're going to go and have a lovely holiday in the Maldives. So they all signed up and they went over to get their free accommodation and their free hotel and get fed. And then the Maldive ministry held the conference in the sea. So you had to sit in a chair in the seawater. And they said, look, our islands are going to disappear in 10 years if you don't do something about it. Now, that was 30 years ago. The Maldives haven't disappeared yet. They're still there. In fact, they're building more hotels. They recently built an airport in the Maldives. I like the cat, Sujata's cat. Yeah. Anyone have any comments, or you want to discuss something further?
So we open the floor for questions now. So Bhante, I think, you talk about these 5 ways. They're more heavy. It's like, oh, change the subject if it's unwholesome thoughts and things like that. But I find that sometimes, most of the time, it's just random, unimportant thoughts. That is very annoying. It's like when you try to be still, it's not important things, just random, just come into your mind, and then when you realize it, and then you just feel so frustrated. It's like, oh, why all these thoughts? It's like sometimes it's not even, don't know where it comes from, but sometimes it's like, for me, it's like, oh, okay, you have something to, oh, I got that email to write, and then you get caught up into, oh, you're going to write something. Oh, no, okay, come back. I think it's a lot of times, when you try to practice, or when all these thoughts keep arising, it's like really very frustrated sometimes.
Yeah, I find the same too, that I can find myself immersed in a story, and then after 5, 10, sometimes half an hour, I kind of shake myself down, and then I think, why on earth was I thinking about that? why did that line of thought seem so important to me? So it comes a bit from the karma of what you've been watching or doing during the day. Those things will start to play out in your mind. In psychology, this is kind of dreaming. And part of the reason is that the idea is that the thoughts will replay themselves out so that you can find some kind of resolution. And they did experiments on this with people with their dreaming. If they interrupt people's dreaming, they were unable to solve problems. But if they allowed people to sleep, something like that. I'm a little skeptical of this kind of thinking myself. I was watching, I don't watch too much TV, but I watch Shark Tank and Dragon's Den. I like those two. And I have one program, it's an indulgent, stupid program. It's called Below Deck. And I watch Below Deck every week. It's a reality TV show. And it's dumb and it's stupid. And I shouldn't watch it probably, but it's only 35 minutes once a week. So, and I found myself thinking about the two women on this ship. It's a super yacht, and they cater to these super rich people who come and hire the yacht for a few days, and the TV show follows the crew. And so there was two women in the crew, and they were arguing, and I found myself just thinking about their argument. And for like half an hour while I was meditating, and then shaking my head and like, wait, why? When did I think that this was a good way to spend my meditation time? This stupid thought just comes up and latches into my mind. And imagine if you could project what you're thinking about onto a screen, and there was other people in the room and they could see. You wouldn't think about these stupid things. That's how we need to do technology. We need to put a little cap on your head so we can see what's going in your head, and then your meditation teacher can come down and point at you and like, why are you thinking about that stupid TV show? Why are you thinking about buying a new plant for your garden or something like that? I will point out that I'm going to go back to screen sharing to show you the last thing that the Buddha actually says in this sutta as it ends. It was also a really interesting and powerful statement. Their mind becomes stilled internally, settles, unifies, and becomes immersed in concentration. This is called a monk who is master of the ways of thought. They will think what they want to think, and they won't think what they don't want to think. So that's a really interesting line. And that will give us the aspiration, like why we are doing this practice in the way that we are. That's the aspiration. So you become the master of your own thinking. Easier said than done, of course, but yeah.
So I had a thought that I shouldn't have. I had a thought. So is it a bit like if I was angry with someone, it's okay and I can entertain that until it's not useful anymore? Is that where I should draw the line? Or because is it part of processing something to have different thoughts as well, to some extent? Or yeah,
right. The question is whether you are doing psychology or Buddhist practice. If you are doing psychology, which sometimes you will need to do, that's valid, is to find some kind of resolution or some kind of way out of a problem that you've got yourself into. And that's what a therapist will do. They will try, or modern day therapists, cognitive behavioral therapists will try to do is reframe the problem that you're having to give you a new way to think about it. And that is good psychology. So if you like have lost your job and it's really hurting you, and if you can reframe it like, well, this is an opportunity for me to go back to college or to find a new job, or, you know, if you can reframe your suffering, that's a sensible way to control your psychology. But if you're doing Buddhist practice, it takes a certain bravery to acknowledge that my thinking isn't going to solve this problem. And the best thing that I can do is put it all down and move my attention into that incredible and blissful and bright and powerful state of unification of the mind. And then when you come back out of that and you remember your problem, you're like, it doesn't seem so big anymore, because you've seen something else. You have that ability to step beyond. And I personally have never really managed to resolve my problematic thinking, but all my resolution has come from when I can go way beyond it. I have a silly story that I can tell you that sums this up, and it's the one that I kept in my mind. I watched a film years ago called The Knockaround Guys, and it's a Vin Diesel film. I don't know why, but I really loved this movie. I recommended it to all my friends, and then they all came back and said, "Yeah, it wasn't very good." But has the John Malkovich in it. I always liked John Malkovich for some reason as an actor. Anyway, there's these two young kids, and they're both kind of dopey, stoner, skateboard kids, and they find a massive bag of money. And all they have to do is take the money and disappear. Just go live somewhere else for the next 5 years, 10 years. That's all they have to do. So they go back to this one guy's room and he starts packing all his stuff. And the other kid says to him, we don't have time. Don't pack your stuff. And the first kid says, but it's my stuff, man. It's my stuff. I've got to have my stuff. And the second kid holds up the bag packed full of money. He says, dude, we'll buy new stuff. And the kid goes, oh yeah. I don't know, that scene always stuck in my mind. And I hold it in my mind when I'm trying to resolve something thinking-wise, that I've forgotten that which lies beyond the thinking mind, the unification of mind, that the beauty and the power and the depth of the spiritual attainments that come with high concentration. I'm like, oh, that's right. That's where it is. So just this week I've been thinking about the Palestine and Israel thing, and I've been listening to one guy that I listen to. His name's George Galloway, but he's very pro-Palestine, and he makes a very good argument. And then I read other stuff, and it doesn't seem right. So I can't resolve that thinking, and I don't want to take sides, and I'm definitely not going to take sides in an argument here. But to know that point in my mind, like, I'm probably never going to resolve it. And if I did, it would be like, well, I'm going to choose this one argument and hang on to it for dear life, which isn't going to help either. But to know that when it all stops and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I don't have to resolve my thinking because there's that other stuff. So the Knockaround Guys. It's probably not a very good movie. I don't know why I liked it so much, but that one scene really just stayed in my mind.
I was going to say, I don't know whether other people have the same experience, but sometimes the thought is going like in a loop. So
Yeah.
you think about it, and then you go, oh, I know I shouldn't think about this. You're aware that you've thought it, and then you say, okay, I shouldn't think about it, should let it go. And then very next minute, it's back again. So it just keeps looping, and you know that it's not right, but it still keeps coming back.
Yeah, in psychology, this is called scripting. And it's like you want to keep rewriting the script until you can come up with a good script. And
It's frustrating
in that,
because you know that it's wrong, but you know, it just keeps coming back.
so the thing to do, first of all, that's going to happen, and it's going to happen to all of us. I'll tell you what happened to me today. I had some vegetarian sausages delivered, but the delivery company took 7 days to deliver them. And when I got them,
Not quite fresh.
the packet, which is supposed to be frozen, is like bursting at the seams with gas.
Oh my God.
And I can show you, I have them here.
Ah!
That is scripting through my mind. That it's like, I want to phone the shop. It's not the shop's fault, it's the delivery company fault. So it's scripting. So one, that's going to happen. There's nothing, you know, don't blame yourself. That is going to happen. But the reason that it happens is you still have attachment. And if you can find that attachment, the attachment comes because of the suffering. If you can just feel that suffering, like I think about I'd forgotten about it. Now you just reminded me. So if I think about my sausages, then what will happen, that little bit of suffering will come up, usually in the belly, before it becomes a thought. And what it is I'm not willing to feel that suffering. And it's not strong, it's not overpowering, can't get the better of me. But because I'm not willing to feel that suffering, I start scripting. If you can go back to the original feeling that's at the source of that script, usually you can get past it. Yeah. But that's an experience everybody has. Yeah.
But you say we change the subject, it's still another thought. Like, it's just thought after thought.
Yeah. If you change the subject, it's another thought. So you're knocking one thought out with another thought.
Mm-hmm.
So the Buddha described it as like a big peg knocking out a smaller peg. But if you can change this unwholesome thought into a thought of love and kindness, or a thought of peace, or a thought of resolution, or in my case, this friend of mine who accused me of setting up the wrong website for her like 8 years ago. I know she doesn't mean it. So I can just remove that thought with the thought of, I like this person. I want to maintain our friendship. She's a really good person. We're very close. I was best friends with her husband until he died 2 years ago. And it's nice that we're still in contact. So I can replace that unwholesome thought with a wholesome thought, and then I'm back in control. But yes, that is still a thought. And so when it comes to meditation, you have to get past the thinking mind. Yeah. Anybody else, or are we good for the day? Okay.
Frank, got any things you want to say? Frank is quiet today.
No, because I feel ashamed of myself, so I better keep quiet. Well, just one thing. I'm not ashamed of. For the past 7 years, I live a celibate life, and I find it's pure pain sometimes. And I blame myself, the thoughts. I see a pretty woman, and then how should I replace that mind with a wholesome thought? So that's why I keep very quiet.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, but again, there's two different practices. One is a psychological practice of trying to resolve your problems and your issues and trying to fix yourself. But I'm a strong believer that the best way to do it is to step beyond yourself. And when you get out of the whole thinking mind altogether and the mind unifies and becomes so bright and strong and beautiful, you're like, oh yeah, that other stuff, I don't need to resolve it because there's this new thing now. Like the kid who was trying to pack his skateboard into his bag and his friend says to him, no, we've got money now. We're buying new skateboards. So my personal practice and advice would be is to not worry too much about resolving your psychology, but concentrate hard on your practice, your concentration practice that will allow you to step out and see something completely different that will recategorize or reorganize or reorientate all that stuff that went before.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you. It's not easy. Definitely.
It's not easy. But again, don't worry too much about trying to solve those problems. The thoughts that you have and the blaming that you have for yourself, I don't mean you, I mean everybody. We blame ourselves, we dislike our character, we worry about our future, we feel bad over missed opportunities. All of that ceases when the mind unifies. And that is your future. I promise you, as somebody who is on the path, there is some little alarm bell that has rung at some point in your life, an experience that you've had that has pointed you to something beyond the ordinary thinking mind. And that's why you have an interest now. That once that is in, you will get there. There is no question. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have this thing: if you have seen a scripture, even for a second, you are guaranteed full enlightenment. In India, there is a mountain called Arunachala, and if you walk around this mountain, you are guaranteed perfect enlightenment. And I walked around the mountain. It's like a pilgrimage people do. So I'm guaranteed perfect enlightenment now. They don't tell you how long it will take before you get your perfect enlightenment. But the point is, once this understanding lodges in your psyche, in your soul, it doesn't matter what you think, what religion you are, or what books you've read, you're going to be drawn along this path and you are going to come to enlightenment. And it's guaranteed. The Lotus Sutra, if ever you've read that, is the key sutra in Mahayana Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism. The opening stanza to the Lotus Sutra is, if you have heard even one word of the Lotus Sutra, you are guaranteed perfect enlightenment. Right? So I'm going to tell you one of the words in the Lotus Sutra. I'm going to tell you this word so that you've heard the word and that you are now guaranteed perfect enlightenment. So one of the words in the Lotus Sutra is lotus.
Lotus.
Now you are guaranteed perfect enlightenment.
But thank you.
I'm serious that there is something that lodges in your soul. It may come from a previous lifetime. It may come from suffering. It may come from a disillusionment in the world. But once it is lodged in, you are always going to be drawn to the path. And at some point that will come to fruition for you.
Thank you, but
Guaranteed.
I'm going to sleep better tonight.
Money back guarantee.
Yeah, very promising promises. So we have hope now. All right.
I know where I saw that clip of the politician, and it definitely was Sydney Harbour, because it was on Gruen. You know Gruen. I'm a massive fan
Oh,
of
Gruen,
Gruen.
Gruen. Gruen. Gruen.
Yeah, Gruen. It used to be called Gruen Transfer. Now they just call it Gruen.
The Gruen, yeah.
And it's a Australian, I think, ABC program about public relations and
Yes.
advertising.
Yeah.
And they've done a few on political campaigns. I'm not interested in politics myself. I'm interested in political campaigns. So I like to read books on how the campaigns are run and how they formulate their messages. So I don't really care about what party they're from. So I've read a lot of books on this and stuff. So that was where I saw the clip of that. Okay, I think we're good, right? I'm going to be with you again in November.
Yeah, in 2nd November. But before that, also next month will be the last talk of the year for 2023 for Bhante. Next month, 2nd November. But also just to remind everyone that Bhante may be coming next year to have a retreat and maybe other activities as well, probably in April and May. So we already locked in the retreat during Anzac Day, which is from the 26th to 25th to 28th April next year. So I'm yet to design the poster. Once I put up the poster, hopefully by next month or end of the year, I'll probably get that ready. So if anyone interested to join the retreat, you have to register early because our space are really limited now. So just to share, this is with the last retreat when Bhante was here at Vijayasala. So we're going to have another retreat at Vijayasala when Bhante come, and talking about that, and all teachers offering their teachings free of charge. And so we hope that if anyone would like to offer dana, especially to Bhante for his traveling to Australia, please go to the website and just offer your dana there, or you can just contact me directly if you wish to offer your dana. And we will arrange for that. Thank you very much, everyone. And can Bhante just give us some blessing before we end the day?
Bhawadvantarayo Sukhiti Kayuko Bhava Abhivadana Sili Sanichang Buddha Pachayino Chattaro Dhamma Vadanti Ayu Vano Sukhang Balang.
Sadhu.
Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you so much for your
Bhante.
teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will do my meditation on you this evening, Doreen. See if you can feel it.
Yeah, wow. Bhante is gonna do the meditation on you, Doreen.